work the late shift to pay for university and come home around midnight. I share a house with my mom and park my car in a garage you can open with a remote control. You can get straight into the house through a door that connects the garage with the basement, which I normally do except for Tuesdays, where I go around the house to pull our trash can onto the street, then enter through the main door. Our house is surrounded by very tall bushes, so you can't see much of the street. It's a small rural village, and I know all my neighbors very well. On a Tuesday night, I returned from my shift, and when I drove onto our street, I noticed an unfamiliar car with its headlights on. Since I know my neighborhood so well, I was kinda confused about the car but couldn't see the license plate, nor the person sitting in the car clearly, since the light was blinding me. You only drive into our street when you live there or visit someone there, since it only circles back to the main street when you follow it to the end. I opened the gate and the garage door remotely and drove inside. From that point, I can only see the street through the gate since the bushes are so high on both sides. I normally would have left the car and walked outside to grab the trash can, but that day I got a long voicemail from a friend and stayed in the car to listen to it. 7 minutes into the message, I lift my gaze and look into my rearview mirror and see a man standing in our driveway behind my car. He didn't move at all, he just stood there perfectly still and watched me. I panicked and locked the doors, then grabbed the remote and closed the extremely slow garage gate. I just sat there for a moment and was scared to leave the car since I couldn't be sure if he didn't enter the garage before the door reached the floor. I also called my mother because the garage door into the basement was locked since I had planned to use the main door. She later told me that she immediately went to the window and couldn't see the man or the car at that point. I told myself it was probably a neighbor who didn't think about how creepy he acted and that I didn't recognize him in the dark, but I asked around and nobody knew the man. I only got the information that the type of car was seen slowly driving around our neighborhood the last days. My mom thinks it was somebody that wanted to surprise me and forced me to let him into the house to rob us. My grandma had just died and nobody knew that my mom spent the nights over. She thinks he waited behind the bushes and got impatient or confused when I didn't excite the car. We never found out who it was. This all started when I was 14, when my mom met her new boyfriend, who I'll call Ray. I remember the first time he met me and my siblings. He looked at my mom and said, "Oh wow, didn't know he had a gang," which looking back on was a very weird thing for him to say, since he had been on a few dates with my mom before and she had told him exactly how many kids she had. Ray seemed normal at first, but he was in his 40s and had 2 older sons from his last marriage who would sometimes come over for dinner, but things went wrong after he moved in. He would yell a lot and have loud arguments with my mom and throw things at her, but he would always sweet talk his way out afterwards. This is probably why she didn't leave him sooner. My mom was crazy young when she had us, and she had always been a bit immature for her age, so I think it made things easier for him. But Ray found it difficult to get along with my siblings and me. He would complain about every little thing we did wrong. It quickly became very controlling. But whenever we complained about how he was acting to our mom, he would accuse us of trying to ruin their relationship. This pretty much worked every time since it would cause her to get angry and yell at us instead of him. As we got older, he stopped us from seeing friends he didn't like and wouldn't allow any friends to come over unless they had his approval first. I realized he was crazy when he picked me up from school one day, which he never did, and while driving home, he accused my sister and me of trash talking him behind his back. When I asked him how he would even know that, he told me he had proof. When we got home, he showed me a tape recorder and played back a recording of my sister and I complaining about him in our bedroom at night. I asked him why the heck he would put recorders in our room, and we had a big argument. I immediately called my mom and told her, but later found out that she never actually said anything about it to him. I made him remove all the tape recorders from our bedroom, but I'm convinced he had kept hiding them since he would sometimes bring up conversations that my sister and I had while he wasn't around. We were so paranoid that we would whisper and we never talked about anything in private in case he would somehow overhear. We were so terrified that he hid cameras as well as tape recorders, and we would dress and undress super quickly so if there was any cameras, he wouldn't be able to see anything. It gets me angry thinking about the fear we lived in while living there. When I was 16, I got a job at a fast food place, and Ray had a big problem with that as well. His reasoning was that my boyfriend at the time worked there, and he believed that I was just going there to mess around. So his way of checking on me was to come and sit in the car, parked, and record me. He did this for a month. He would show me the recordings after, which would just lead me to even more arguments with him, ending up with me, a 16-year-old, begging a 40-year-old man not to stalk me at work. I was pretty much done at this point and moved in with my dad, who had just moved back from NZ. My dad was very pissed when I told him about everything that had just happened, and he wanted to call the police on Ray, but my mom begged him not to. They broke up a few years later over something unrelated, so thankfully I never saw him again. This happened to me when I was about 10 years old, but even now as an adult in my 30s, I remember it like it was yesterday. My parents had taken my sister and I out to a movie, and then to get ice cream in celebration of my older sister getting straight A's on her report card. I remember my dad had gone off work later than usual, so by the time the movie was over and we had our ice cream, it was well past our bedtime. It didn't matter though, my parents were happy and proud of my sister. We had a great time, and we took our time getting home. If it wasn't for what happened when we got there, I would have always looked back fondly on this night. We got home around 10:30. Bedtime was usually 10, so I went straight to my room to put my pajamas on while my sister went to brush her teeth. I remember thinking it seemed a little more chilly in the house that night, but that's the only thing out of the ordinary I can recall from when we first walked in. I barely had a chance to change when I heard my dad yell our names from what I thought was the kitchen. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew it was bad because I heard fear in his voice for the first time. It scared me real bad. I bolted out the door and into the kitchen as fast as I could. My sister was already there, and her and my parents were standing very close. My mom looked like she was on the verge of panic, and she motioned for me to come close. She wrapped her arms around my sister, and my dad was already on the phone dialing. I noticed some glass on the floor. I asked my mom what was wrong, but she didn't want to tell me. She said we needed to go outside right away. As we headed out the front door, I heard my dad talking to a 911 operator and telling them that when we got home, he found our back sliding glass door shattered and objects strewn around the kitchen. We went to the neighbor's house and waited for the police to come. After a few minutes, my dad joined us. He seemed to be well shaken up, which was a new sight to me. The police arrived and searched the house extensively. It was a big scene with all our neighbors outside and flashing lights illuminating our entire street for hours. They never found anybody in our house. Whoever it was had come and gone. The thing that gets me is that nothing was stolen. Whoever it was didn't want any of our possessions. What they did was take our canned food out of the pantry and stack them into a small pyramid on our kitchen counter. They also turned on the TV in the basement and moved a few random objects to different parts of the house. It was very creepy. It was like an insane person had been in our home and did things for reasons that only made sense to him. As the police were finishing up and ready to leave, I heard one of them ask my mom a question. They talked quietly, and I'm sure they thought I didn't hear. I pretended not to be listening, but I heard everything. You see, we kept magnetized letters on our fridge, and we used them to leave each other messages for fun sometimes. The cop was asking my mom if the message on there that night was done by any of us. It wasn't. I watched my mom turn pale when he told her what it said. It still makes my skin crawl to this very day. It said, "Always watching." The police didn't find any fingerprints. They said the intruder had been wearing gloves. For the next few days, the entire family was extremely uneasy. I was absolutely positive the intruder was still in the house somehow, that there was a hidden place nobody knew about where he could hide and listen to us. I never shook the feeling that somebody was there. Within a few months, we decided to move. It was just too scary for us to stay in that area. We moved to a house several miles away. We were never bothered again, but I still do think about it. Was it kids playing a prank? Was it some insane person that wanted to torment a random family? Or was it someone that truly had it out for us and who really was watching? Could have been a neighbor or someone we knew. These questions still keep me up at night sometimes. This happened many years ago, but the hairs on my neck stand up sometimes when I'm alone at home, and I have to check the house to make sure no one's hiding.